Hello, good day. I am Merlin Omboy Ampalo, and for today's video, we, together with LJ and Adam, we are going to discuss the assigned topics for us, which is the model of the sign in semiotics. In this discussion, we are going to focus on the different models of the signs. So sign, what does it mean when we say sign? According to Peirce 1931, all individuals are meaning makers because we interpret things as signs unconsciously by relating them to familiar system of conventions. So to have a deeper understanding about signs in semiotics, let us all discuss or let us know more about the Saussurean model, named after Ferdinand de Saussure, which he believes that the connection between the signifier and the signified is arbitrary. So Saussurean model is a dyadic tradition. The two parts of a sign consist of a sign vehicle and its meaning. So in other words, this model believes that the sign is made up by two elements, which is the signifier and the signified. So when we say signified, it is the when we say signified, it refers to the conceptual dimension of the sign. It could be the concept or ideas expressed by the signifier. In short, it is the conceptual dimension. Next is the signifier. It is the word doing the representing. Signifier refers to the physical dimension of the sign. It could be the sounds, the printed words, or the images. Or in short, it is the physical dimension. So again, the signified is the conceptual dimension and the signifier is the physical dimension. The sign is the whole that results from the association of the signifier and the signified. The Saussurean model. A linguistic sign is not a link between a thing and a name, but between a concept or the signified and a sound pattern, which is the signifier. The sound pattern is not actually a sound, for a sound is something physical. A sound pattern is the hearer's psychological impression of a sound, as given to him by the hearer's as given to him by the evidence of his senses. This sound pattern may be called a material element only in that it is the representation of our sensory impressions. The sound pattern may thus be distinguished from the other element associated with it in a linguistic sign. This other element is generally of a more abstract kind, or the concept. So, if we take a linguistic example, the word open, when it is invested with meaning by someone who encounters it in a public, or for example in a library, in a doorway. If we take a linguistic example for the word open, the signifier is the word open, and the signified concept might be that the library is open for reading and for borrowing books. So that is the signified concept. It might be open for reading and for borrowing books. So according to Saussurean model, a sign must have both a signifier and a signified. You cannot have a totally meaningless signifier or a completely formless signified. Saussure stressed that sound and thought, or the signifier and the signified, were as inseparable as the two sides of a piece of paper. So as you can see on the figure or in the picture, there is a circle, and inside of the circle there is a line divided the circle into two, which make the signifier in the upper part and the signified in the lower part of the circle. This line divided the two. This line divided the circle is what they call as the bar or the broken line. And The lines in different sides of the circle is the lines representing the relationship between the signifier and the signified. So overall, in this picture or in this figure, we can say that the signifier and the signified must go hand on hand. According to Saussure, the signifier and signified is inseparable, at it is just like the two sides of the piece of paper. In Saussurean model, meaning was purely structural and relational rather than referential. Primacy is given to relationships rather than to things. The meaning of signs was seen as lying in their systematic relation to each other rather than deriving from any inherent features of signifiers or any reference to material things. In addition, the sign is more than the sum of its parts. The notion of value shows us that it is a great mistake to consider a sign as nothing more than the combination of a certain sound and a certain concept. To think of a sign as nothing more would be to isolate it from the system to which it belongs. It would be to suppose that a start could be made with individual signs and a system constructed by putting them together. On the contrary, the system as a united whole is the starting point, from which it becomes a possible by a process of analysis to identify its constituent elements. Saussure's relational conception of meaning was specifically differential. First, he emphasized the difference between signs, that language for him was a system of functional differences and oppositions. Second, in a language, as in every other semiological system, what distinguishes a sign is what constitutes it. Saussure emphasized in a particular negative oppositional differences between signs. He argued that concepts are defined not positively in terms of their content, but negatively by contrast with other items in the same system. What characterizes each most exactly is being whatever the others are not. That simply means that the relationship between a sound, a word, or an image and its meaning is not a natural nor universal but conventional. Thus, the meaning has to be learned and it can be changed over time. So, let's say, for example, an American English word water, tubig in the Filipino term. One object can therefore be called in different names in different countries simply because there is an arbitrary relationship between the signifier and the signified. In fact, a signifier can carry a different signified as time passes by, and a certain signified can take on different signifier as time passes by. Sign arbitrariness. Saussurean semioticians emphasize that there is no necessary intrinsic or direct or inevitable relationship between the signifier and the signified. Saussure stressed the arbitrariness of the sign, more specifically, the arbitrariness of the link between the signifier and the signified. Saussure stressed that there is no inherent, essential, transparent, self-evident, or natural connection between the signifier and the signified, between the sound of a word and the concept to which it refers. So the arbitrary aspect of signs does help to account for the scope for their interpretation and or the importance of the context. There is no one-to-one link between the signifier and the signified. Signs have multiple rather than the single meanings. Within a single language, one signifier may refer to many sign fields, and one sign field may be referred to by many signifiers. So, as I have mentioned a while ago, that a signifier can carry a different signified as time passes by, and a certain signified can take on different signifier as time passes by. So that's for the sign arbitrariness. Sign arbitrariness and society conventions. Even in the case of the arbitrary colors of traffic lights, the original choice of red for stop was not entirely arbitrary, since it already carried relevant associations with danger. As Levi-Strauss noted, the sign is arbitrary a priori but ceases to be arbitrary a posteriori. After the sign has come into historical existence, it cannot be arbitrarily changed. As part of its social use within a sign system, every sign acquires a history and connotation of its own which are familiar to members of the sign users, or in if you share same culture, then you share same or familiar signs. Saussure remarked that although the signifier may be seem to be freely chosen from the point of view of the linguistic community, it is imposed rather than freely chosen, because a language is always an inheritance from the past which its users have no choice but to accept. Always remember a remarkable thought from Saussurean model, that a language is always an inheritance from the past, which its users have no choice but to accept. So let's continue our discussions with the relations between signs. According to Saussure, he argued that signs only make sense as part of a formal, generalized, and abstract system. He also argues that we know the meaning of the sign because we relate it to other signs in a system. As you can see in the figure below, it is a figure that there is a circle, inside of it a signified and the signifier, and another arrow for another signified and signifier, and so on. According to Saussure, that we know the meaning of a particular thing by knowing what is not. So we know that the dog is a dog because we know that the dog is not a cat, or it is not a kangaroo. This figure shows that we know the meaning of a particular sign by differentiating it by other signs. That is why Saussure said that the meaning of the signs is referential and differential. We focus on the difference. For example, the word the word father. We know that the word father is a father because it is not a mother, because it is not a brother, because father is a father and father is not a sister. So we focus on the difference. That is how Saussure conceptualized the meaning of signs. So that's all for the Saussurean model. I hope you guys learned something from me today. And let us always remember that this Saussurean model, or Ferdinand de Saussure, believes that the connection between the signifier and the signified is arbitrary. So at this juncture, I will give the floor to Miss L. Jane Adam to continue her discussion in another model, which is by Charles Peirce. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Eljane B. Adam, and now I will be discussing the next model, which is the first model. So Charles Sanders Peirce, he was an American philosopher, mathematician, logician, and scientist. He was engaged as a scientist and made great contributions in the field of mathematics, statistics, philosophy, semiotics, research methodology, and logic. He was precipitated by the philosopher called Paul Weiss, the most original and versatile of American philosophers and America greatest logician in 1934, and also he is one of the founders of semiotics. So sign, a concept sign is drawn from semiotic. A sign is anything that stands for something else and the production of meaning. It maybe includes words, photographs, sounds, and gestures. Three characteristics of sign. It must have a physical form. It must refer to something other than itself. It must be used and recognized as a sign. So Peirce model, according to Charles Sanders Peirce, the sign relation is the key. He described this sign relation with three basic elements of semiotics. First, its sign represents. Second, object, semiotics subject. Third is interpreted meaning. Anything that stands for something else and the production of meaning is called sign. Any sign which has subject to express the matter is called object. Signs have meaning with its translate to get meaning. It's called interpreting. First describe its triadic relation. All three elements are depending on each other to produce the same meaning. The sign is a subject which refers the matter is called object. At the same time, without interpreting, there is no meaning of the sign. A sign represents something which interpretable to refer something. It may be a symbol, linguistics, or sounds. A sign stands for a subject called object. It can be thinkable, a rule, a quality, or occurrency, and etc. A sign's meaning which form some kind of idea or effects to interpret other is called interpreting. In the traffic, green light represent to move or go. As per the theory, the green light is the sign. A object green light represent the interpreted meaning is also the same. In real life situation, all these competence and elements are not separable. And Peirce explains the semiotic structures by using triangle relationship. For example, the letter X stands for virus, other reference of interpretation. The A sign X gives a symbolic reference for traffic. Signal experts further analyze the X by giving certain interpretation, meaning danger or not, more further or caution. And B sign X gives symbolic reference for mathematical sign X. In this case, the interpretation gives the multiplication sign X between two numbers. And the Peirce model of communication heavily leans to the fields of semiotics. The consideration of this theory as pure hardcore communication theory is virtue. And that's all for my report, and thank you and God bless.